Hi, I'm Charity Mainwaring. Welcome to Strong Stories. If you want to hear more about the remarkable lives of brave women who shaped history, be sure to hit subscribe. Fake identities, a false wall hiding a secret, and somehow over 800 Dutch Jews evading the clutches of the Nazis who were searching for them by seemingly evaporating into thin air. And one woman at the center of it all. Corrie ten Boom was a nondescript middle-aged watchmaker by day, and by night, the head of a secret organization that rescued hundreds of Jews right out from under the noses of Hitler's Nazis who were arresting them and sending them to the death camps. Meet Corrie. Here's her story. On a bright September day in 1943, 17 people were crowded into the little dining room of Casper ten Boom, a renowned watchmaker of 83 years old, known throughout his hometown of Haarlem, Holland as Grandfather. When this family shop with residents above and behind the store had celebrated its 100th anniversary a few years earlier, it had seemed like half the city, including the mayor, had come by the boisterous day-long party. But today, matters were quite different. The group spoke in soft voices with the curtains drawn tight, even though the late summer sun shone cheerfully on the busy streets outside. Because today, as had been true for over 3 years now, amidst the bustle of passers-by, could be heard from time to time the unmistakable tramp of marching feet. Anyone paying close attention in this old quarter of Haarlem would have noticed that there had been an unusual number of customers coming and going from the small watch shop at all hours for over a year now. Sometimes people went in and never left. However, not even the nosiest neighbor knew of the radio hidden in the staircase, or the illegal telephone with an unheard of private line, or the elaborate system of electric warning buzzers, or the hiding place, a secret room whose builder declared the Gestapo could never find it in 100 years of searching. Had any German soldiers or Dutch collaborators on the streets outside guessed the true identities of the 17 people gathered in the little shop that day, 7 of their number would have been as good as dead for the simple crime in Hitler's occupied Europe of being Jewish. 9 would have been in extreme peril as agents in the Dutch resistance movement. But catching and exposing the one would have been the grand prize for any ambitious Nazi, because Corrie ten Boom, youngest daughter of the watchmaker, was ringleader of a national underground movement to hide hundreds of Jews all over Holland. Corrie ten Boom was born on April 15, 1892, the last of 4 children. Homes in Haarlem, Netherlands were tall, thin, and old. Corrie's was built in the 1600s, and when Corrie's 3 unmarried aunts moved in with them, her father purchased the even taller and even older house adjoining theirs to the rear, this one built in the 1400s, and the 2 houses were awkwardly linked by a spiral staircase, even though their stories did not line up. This led to strange angles and odd corners, a house that could hold many secrets. When Corrie was 14, her older brother Willem brought home a friend from university named Carl. Corrie remembered later, "I took that long, strong hand, looked up onto those deep brown eyes, and fell irretrievably in love." For the next 10 years, occasions where Carl would be present were the highlight of her young life. Unlike other boys who ignored Corrie in favor of her older sister Nolly, Carl was charming toward her, and they began exchanging letters. For one blissful period, they walked every evening and discussed their future plans. Soon they were talking as if both their futures would be entwined forever. It was her brother Willem who broke the news to Corrie that Carl was not free to marry whomever he wished. His family was angling for an upper-class betrothal, and working-class Corrie would never do. Carl's letters grew fewer and farther between, but Corrie did not lose hope. One day when she was 24, she heard the doorbell ring, and opening it, there was Carl. But on his arm was a young lady in expensive furs. "I'd like you to meet my fiancé." Corrie somehow got through the visit wearing a polite mask, then dashed to her bedroom where the tears could come. Somehow she knew, as she lay sobbing, that she would never marry. Corrie refused to become, in her own words, an embittered spinster. By day, she took over management of the watch shop, rationalizing her father's chaotic finances and bookkeeping. Corrie became the first licensed female watchmaker in Holland. And when her mother passed away in 1921, Corrie and her sister Betsie continued her work of bringing food to the sick and dying all over Haarlem. Corrie started a weekly Bible study group for the intellectually disabled, and the Ten Booms opened up their home to a succession of foster children who, as Corrie put it, kept the old walls ringing with laughter. But from time to time, another voice could be heard ringing the old walls, an angry voice screaming in German over the radio. But her older sister, Betsie, always rushed to turn it off. On May 1940, Corrie, Betsie, and their father listened as the Dutch Prime Minister addressed the nation over the radio. There would be no war, he assured them. Dutch neutrality would be respected. However, in just 5 hours' time, Corrie was awakened with a start as Hitler's bombs began to fall. That night, Corrie dreamt that she was being pulled in a wagon through the streets of Haarlem. Her sister was there too, along with her father, her brother, and many of her friends. They could not get out, and each knew they were being taken somewhere far from home and safety. 4 days later, Holland surrendered. The conquerors promised to respect Dutch laws. As a Germanic people, the Dutch would be treated well, it was said. Only slowly did the Ten Booms realize something dark and sinister was taking root. A repaired watch unclaimed by a Jewish customer, an empty house down the street, rumors of midnight arrests. Were the Jews of Haarlem going into hiding or being rounded up? Already whispers had reached Corrie's ears of death camps in Germany. One afternoon in November 1941, hearing cries outside, Corrie emerged to see soldiers entering the shop of a Jewish furrier across the street. The stunned owner was thrown out at gunpoint while the soldiers rummaged his belongings. Without pausing to think, Corrie pulled the man into the watch shop. Corrie's brother, a minister, knew of a farmhouse that would take the man in, and he was moved under the cover of darkness. How often it is, said Corrie later, that a small, unconscious event marks a turning point in our lives. A few days later, delivering a watch to a Jewish family and hearing their children playing upstairs, a prayer formed in Corrie's heart. She offered herself to God to serve these people in any way, any place, any time. One evening, 5 minutes before the 8 p.m. curfew, Corrie heard a knock at the door. "I'm a Jew," came a woman's tremulous voice. She had heard they helped a furrier, and again, Corrie found a place for her in the country. Just 2 nights later, another knock, this time a married couple. But now farmers who were willing to take in and feed refugees were growing thin as people began to feel the pinch from wartime food rationing. Corrie knew what she needed to find a home for this couple: ration cards. Farmers would be far more willing to hide Jews if they came with their own food cards, but how to get them? Forgery was an impossibility, as security measures for these precious cards were very, very tight. But her brother, the minister, had the answer: you steal them. Corrie knew a man who worked at the food office. She had taught his disabled daughter for years. Would he dare to help? The next day, the man was understandably silent for a while when Corrie confided her need. It was difficult, he finally told her, but not impossible. If they found us bound and gagged, he mused. Corrie understood. They would fake being beaten and robbed as an excuse for the missing cards. "How many cards do you need?" the man asked her. Corrie opened her mouth to say 5, but was astonished to hear her own voice. 100. The plan worked, and just in time, as the trickle of fleeing refugees became a flood. Armed with ration cards, Corrie succeeded again and again in finding homes for the Jewish refugees. One night, long after curfew, Corrie was guided on a clandestine bicycle journey to the fashionable part of town, where she was amazed to be served real coffee and cakes. She was meeting the national leadership of Dutch resistance. Corrie, having a pretty bad case of imposter syndrome, blushed to be introduced as the head of an operation in this city to rescue Jews. These very important men spent most of their time coordinating with the British government to undermine the German army, but now they wanted to join her cause. They provided false identity papers, use of a car with government plates, a private telephone line, signature forgery, and a nationally recognized architect who insisted he would come by and build her a secret room. A few days later, the architect laughed with delight when he saw the crooked walls and unexpected landings of Corrie's crazy old haphazard house. As a false brick wall and secret room were constructed in coming days, the biggest difficulty was explaining to her aging father how it was that every workman building the room claimed to be named Smith. The unwaveringly honest old watchmaker could not wrap his head around the idea of an alias, and he kept asking every one of them if they were related to any of the Smiths that he knew. There were 7 Jews who could not be housed anywhere in Holland, even with ration cards. One had a terrible asthma, which would give away all but the solidest hiding places. Others were so recognizably Jewish that no one would dare take them in. For these, the ones no one wanted, the Ten Boom's home was the last defense against the concentration camp. Once the electric buzzers were in place, Corrie held regular drills. They learned not just to hide their bodies, but any telltale possessions. So toothbrushes, pipe tobacco, dirty dishes, all hidden away within roughly 60 seconds of the alarm sounding. By 1943, Corrie was the leader of a secret organization with operations in the farthest reaches of Holland. Her home buzzed with the comings and goings of agents, reports, refugees, phone calls, stolen ration cards, and supplies. When willing farmers became scarce, homes were found in the cities right under the Gestapo agents' noses. By the end of that year, nearly 800 Jewish people had been saved from the gas chamber. But Corrie was uneasy. She felt that sooner or later, a mistake was inevitable. One afternoon in late January of '44, Corrie received word from a police officer whom she'd recruited that a raid was planned on one of her safe houses. She quickly sent a young man to warn the Jews there, but it was a Gestapo agent who came to the door when he pounded, and he was immediately arrested. Later that day, when Corrie's police officer gave her the bad news of her agent's arrest, he added, "Let's face it, the Gestapo will get information out of him." Corrie considered shutting down her organization, but could not bring herself to do it. Think about what that decision cost her. She had lived the last couple years under constant threat of being caught, and all that meant for her and her family. But now, continuing her work didn't carry a risk of being caught. It was a certainty. Imagine just the sheer grit and courage it took to keep fighting to protect the Jews of her nation. She reflected, "Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength." On the morning of February 28, 1944, Corrie was bedridden with the flu. Her sister Betsie entered her room, saying a man was in the watch shop insisting he must speak to her. Aching all over, Corrie went downstairs. The man seemed desperate. "My wife has been arrested for helping Jews. I need 600 guilders to bribe the police to let her go." Corrie promised if he came back later, she would have the money. The man, Jan Vogel, looked Corrie right in the eye. "I'll never forget this." A few hours later, Corrie's home was raided by the Gestapo. Jan Vogel had been a Dutch spy working for the Germans. The house was full of Dutch resistance workers and many of Corrie's friends at the time. Corrie, Betsie, their father and brother, and a number of friends were beaten and arrested. "So you're the ringleader," the lead agent said when Corrie was brought before him. "Where are the Jews?" he demanded, striking Corrie on the face again and again. "Help me, Lord Jesus," Corrie cried out. "If you say that name again, I will kill you," the agent hissed, but he stopped striking her. As the group was driven past the towering cathedral in Haarlem's central square, Corrie remembered her chilling dream from the night of the invasion. She felt she had lived through this moment before. Her family and friends carted off against their will toward danger. As Corrie vividly recounts in her best-selling autobiography, The Hiding Place, she and her sister Betsie endured 10 months of slave labor and starvation, including 4 in the notorious death camp of Ravensbruck in Germany. At one point during the first few months of her incarceration, she was in solitary confinement, and she received a letter bearing news. Her father had died within 10 days of his arrest, the grandfather of Haarlem tossed carelessly in a mass grave. And hidden beneath the stamp in tiny, tiny print, she read, "All your clocks are safe." She knew what the encoded message meant. The hiding place and the people inside had not been discovered. Her beloved sister Betsie died a few days before Christmas, expressing love and forgiveness for her German captors to the very end. On December 30th, 1944, Corrie was released from the death camp. She was told years later, when she returned to the site, that her release had been a clerical error and that every other woman in her age group had been gassed the very next week. Upon her return to Holland, Corrie found she couldn't enter back into her old life as a watchmaker. As she walked the streets of Haarlem, witnessing the pain that the sturdy Dutch people could not quite keep off their faces in that winter of Holland's starvation, Corrie dwelt on her sister's dying vision, a home of healing and restoration for the survivors of the concentration camps. With spring came liberation, and Corrie went on to open and run just such a home. But there was another group of people in dire straits, one less easy to love. Corrie opened a healing place for Dutch collaborators, now in total disgrace, to find forgiveness and a new lease on life. She would spend the next 3.5 decades traveling the world, telling her story in over 60 countries and writing several best-selling books. In 1975, a movie, The Hiding Place, was made about her life. Corrie ten Boom died on her birthday in 1983, age 91, in Santa Ana, California. At least 800 Dutch Jews survived the war as a result of her courage. One of the most famous stories about Corrie happened after the war while she was speaking in Germany. Corrie had at one point found herself face to face with one of the very guards who had viciously tortured her dying sister. "Will you forgive me?" he asked, extending a hand. Corrie had found that she could not forgive, remembering her sister's pain. She recalled praying, "Jesus, I cannot forgive him. Give your forgiveness." As I took his hand, the most incredible thing happened. From my shoulder, along my arm, and through my hand, a current seemed to pass from me to him, while into my heart sprang a love for this stranger that almost overwhelmed me. Long after her death, Corrie ten Boom's message of love and forgiveness lives on. And that, my friends, is the story of Corrie ten Boom. Thank you so much for watching today. Please hit the like button, help us spread the word about this channel, and if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and do that now. Hit the bell so you're notified when we post new videos. And if you have any ideas for women you'd like us to cover, please let us know in the comments right now. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, you can do hard things. Be brave, be strong.